Guys, today I'm going to talk as best I can about the fear of rejection and the fear of failure and why this fear exists in our mind and how we can manage it. It's a skill set that you're going to need regardless of your endeavors in your life. The fear of rejection, the fear of failure, it's something that haunts all of us. And I think first understanding what that fear is, give it context, identify it, and spotlight it. Fear by its very nature is a mechanism for survival. It's to stop you from doing something because the status quo is keeping you alive. But that is not how the world works. That's not how we get anything done. We have to use fear to transport us to that next level. So I'm going to set a bit of a premise here about how, one, to identify it, two, how to overcome it, and three, how to use it. So the first thing is identifying your fear, right? When you're managing or you're trying to overcome any fear, the first thing to do is to identify it. I'm going to walk you through a scenario here that really helped me. Imagine it's a beautiful day outside. The sun is shining, it's clear everywhere, you can see everything. And I'm sitting on my porch at home, you're standing next to me, and I say to you, hey, I would love it if you were to walk across the street and stand on the porch of the house looking at us. Would you be met with any fear if you were to do that? Probably not. There really isn't much to be afraid of. You can see where you're going, all your senses are with you, so the fear likely isn't there. But let's practice the same idea, but now we're going to do it at night, okay? So all the lights are off, there's no lights on the houses, there's no lights on the streets, there's no moonlight, there's no stars, you've got cloud cover. I'm still standing with you on that same porch, and I look to you and I say, hey, I'd love it if you walked across the street to that other house. It's only 50 feet. Are you going to feel fear? Maybe. Probably. You'll feel some degree of fear. When you remove the senses or you don't have experience doing something, the reason that your fear is driving up in the middle of the night is because you don't know where your next step is going to put you. You don't know where your next step is supposed to go. I mean, you could walk 50 feet in the wrong direction and you wouldn't know. That creates a sense of fear. It's a fear of unknown. And that's your body's mechanism of trying to keep you safe, trying to keep you alive. It's doing its job. But here's where it gets a little ridiculous. Why do we feel that fear in the dark? Is it the dark itself that we're scared of? Unlikely. What we're actually afraid of is the lack of light in the dark. It's not the darkness itself, but the lack of not knowing where our next step is going to put us. We can't grasp anything that's in front of us because we don't know what's in front of us. And anytime you can't grasp the unknown, you will fear it. And such is the way we deal with the fear of rejection or the fear of failure, getting on the phone with someone and talking about them. Honestly speaking, every time I pick the phone up, I run through the scenario in my head. It's like a horror movie. I start the phone call, somehow it goes horribly wrong, and in my mind I end up dead and a terrible real estate agent and I'm gonna fail. That's honestly how it goes. And honestly speaking, I replay that video, that movie, that film over and over and over again in my mind. And it always has the same outcome. And this is where it gets really ridiculous because now I fear something that doesn't even exist. My mind is projecting. It's falsifying reality, corrupting it even, to a point that all I can see now is that fear. When in fact, the outcome of the scenario I put in my mind or the outcome I'm gonna have on the phone with that person has 1,000 different outcomes that are probably more likely to happen than the one I'm replaying in my head. When you think about all the things that you're afraid of, how many times has it actually played out the way you thought it would? It probably hasn't. So fear is almost always about something that does not exist. And we cannot fight or overcome something that does not exist. Rather, I would suggest we use this fear and we put the energy into a place that will allow us to overcome it. And that is by having some sort of understanding of where your next foot is going to go in the dark, illuminating your next move. Fear typically has gotten you into a certain pattern of thinking that this outcome is going to happen, when that pattern of thinking is ridiculous because you have no real experience to justify that. The horror movie that we play in our mind, we know the ending. It's the same ending over and over again. So try and play a different movie in your mind. Create a different outcome. Create a different scenario for yourself. Instead of a horror movie, maybe it's a comedy. You're gonna make that person laugh on the other end. Whatever movie you create in your mind, the outcome is unlikely. But if you create movies in your mind that produce a different outcome, that produce an outcome of love, or produce an outcome of comedy, or produce an outcome of suspense or thrills, chances are you're gonna walk around with that presence in your life too. If you walk around in a fearful state, you're gonna project a fearful state of mind. Mind you, if you think of all the outcomes that could happen as a result of your positive actions, you might be very surprised about the outcomes that you garnish. Lastly, just as a person, from person to person, you cannot really enjoy what is happening in your life or around your life if you live in fear. And therefore, you cannot really enjoy your life if you first don't fix what's going wrong or what's on repeat in your mind. Whatever outcome you create in your mind is likely going to be the reality you project for yourself. And that will either paralyze you or motivate you. Either way, the outcomes that we want or the outcomes that we fear, neither exist. Stop repeating the outcome, the pattern of thinking that you're used to. Start thinking about the opportunities that you could create as a result of that phone call. There's gonna be more and more opportunity if I take the approach of not being fearful.